Just answering questions with waptek. Do you really believe the stuff you're saying? And this is under a video about Patricia McCullough, a Commonwealth Court judge in Pennsylvania, who tried and failed to block counting the vote in Pennsylvania. She didn't have authority to do so. She kind of did, but it was outside of her purview. And my complaints about the reasoning given for it, which is every single time someone brings this up and they're in public where you're not legally forbidden from lying and there's no punishment for it, they say all sorts of grandiose statements. Millions of votes stolen. Donald Trump won by a landslide. And then when they show up in court, because this is a smokescreen, every time out of the 30-plus court cases on behalf of the Trump administration, Trump campaign, or just the Republican Party, all of them have been lost except one, and it was a simple let's have a recount one, which makes sense. Every time evidence is demanded in court, which you have to respond to truthfully, they say they don't have any. And every time they say things publicly, they claim they have a mountain of evidence. And then when you point out that they said they didn't have any evidence in court, they make up a story because they can get away with it because, again, they're not required to tell the truth. Do you really believe the stuff you're saying on the subject? I don't necessarily believe the assertions of Trump's lawyers or people who are working on his behalf, because it's exclusively about him being elected. But that's what they said in court. Deb. That's it. I'm quoting his own fucking law team, some of which are really stupid. In the case of the Commonwealth Court judge that tried to block the election from being finished interstate, it's based on her citing the rumor mill exacerbated directly by Donald Trump and the administration, and them filing dozens and dozens of court cases, all of which have been thrown out or lost or withdrawn because they had to admit they didn't have any evidence. And I don't know if you understand this. In every single election, you can find evidence of something hinky going on. They went out of their way to come into a room saying something that's demonstratively untrue. That's the one thing we can conclude of this. Because they don't want to bring proof. They don't care. And there is evidence of their attempts to do this being a way to literally rig an election after the fact by preventing a vote from being certified. The votes have been counted. In a couple of cases, they brought up a good point. The election rules changed less than, let's say, 8 months ago or a year ago. Maybe that's too short, and allowed for a certain number of ballots to be let in. And the reason cited by each of the states is people are not able to vote in the numbers they want to, and they're requesting to be able to do it by mail-in primarily. And the only reason Republicans didn't take advantage of this is Trump tactically said, don't vote by mail unless you have to. Because he wanted to create a difference, because in every state that this was done in, they decided to make sure that in-person voting was counted first, and then mail-in ballots last. And they did take advantage of it, and yes, they wrote up their script beforehand, that when they saw a surge in Biden votes, because they knew it was going to, they saw the writing on the wall. They wanted to make it look like something that was fake going on. Somebody was falsifying the vote. Ballot stuffing. Except that those ballots arrived earlier. They'd been sitting around in a bucket, guarded, waiting to be counted. It wasn't late votes for Biden, it was early votes. That was a tactical behavior on the part of a group of people trying to simulate an election being fraudulently done by Democrats. Now, the only reason I'm making this obviously biased statement is some of them fucking said they did it for that reason. Some of the lower echelon people talked about it online. It's a tactic. And they've talked about doing it in previous years for other reasons, in other ways. Other places, they told everybody to vote by mail-in so they could have a similar effect. They wanted to have a surge of votes. And then the after-the-fact court cases to try to invalidate whatever vote group they figured was done by Democrats. They didn't try to get rid of votes based on them being legitimately bad. They did it because they were Democrats, because they filed cases in each state on a different subject that would have the effect of just disenfranchising Democrats mostly, and the other one disenfranchising them here, using opposite logic. The logic doesn't apply universally. Well, states are different, I understand, but the effect is still the same, and more importantly, the intention to get rid of Democrat votes so that they could try to get rid of Donald Trump losing. And this also had the effect, because a lot of people split the ticket, of fucking over a bunch of Republicans in the state. It's their neck. Dozens of Republicans get to lose the positions because you want to keep Trump in charge? She halted the process because fraudulent Democrat cheat. They are not going to get away with it. Trump is your president and will remain president for 4 more years, whether you like it or not. Chris Lancaster. No, Chris, he won't, because we all voted against him. He's going to have about 7 million votes against him. You want to invalidate 7 million American citizens' right to vote because you didn't like losing. Chris Lancaster, you lost the vote. So did Trump. There's nothing you can do about it. It's called reality. That's the end of it. The only thing that's being tried here is to prevent votes from being counted. She was in danger of getting removed from the bench because she did this out of emotion and angst. And most importantly, sucking up to a president. And yeah, Democrats would do the same thing, I'm sure, right? I love how you assume there is no evidence. No, I did not. I said there's evidence every fucking year of something going on. It's usually local. Sometimes it's county. Sometimes it can be a state election. But it's almost never federal. Because you'd have to assume a bunch of people are willing to potentially go to prison for a conspiracy to rig an election. Every fucking time you guys lose. You never claim that the Republicans rig an election. Richard Bigham. Yes, Dick Bigham has spoken. Cool name. You obviously tried and failed to find anything inaccurate with Dr. Mike Yeadon saying. You resorted instead to focusing on inaccuracies other people have made when quoting his credentials, and on and on. I'll be getting to that in a minute. But let's get on to the rest of this judge here. So you don't care if the election is free and fair. Yes, I do. And people after the fact, after it's been judged by the state, by the courts, repeatedly, people keep saying, elections are decided by the judges. No, they're not. They're decided by us. After repeatedly being told, no, it's not a rigged election, and no, you're not allowed to sue anymore, they just dead ass say, we want you to cheat. And the they I'm referring to isn't the Democrats. I'm not ignoring a rigged election or an attempt at it. I'm stating that this failed coup d'etat by Republicans, because it's on the federal level for the president, is something I'm very much aware of. Mike Bigham not being willing to acknowledge that the Republican Party is allowing a very tiny, noisy, stupid population to scream, vote Trump when the voting's over. That's a problem. I didn't expect a lesser creepy video from a Democrat. Put some light on yourself. I'm doing my best computer simulation of a human on a spacecraft where there's a vampire werewolf. So anyway, thank you, Randy Woody. Richard Bigham, Randy Woody. I might use you in the title, I don't know. Why are you spreading lies? Anyone can check on this guy. Again, with the Doctor Who. Doctor Who. Not a Doctor Who joke. He for people that are convinced it's impossible for fraud to have affected the outcome of the election, they're sure getting mad about it being looked into. Yes, and I want to point out my presumption that there is no election fraud. It's not real. That's not really true. When people make a claim, big as fuck, that millions of votes, billions of votes, yes, someone actually said that, even though there's not enough people to do that, the vote was fraudulent, billions of votes or millions of votes. And then when they show up in court and state flat out, we do not have any evidence of any kind of election fraud of any kind, minor or major. One entire state's case that was brought was based on 55 votes. Another was based on hearsay that was retracted. Another one was based on noticing 5 or 6 votes out of a couple of thousand in various areas that looked weird. What's funny is a couple of them were cases where they said they were questioning the vote, but the votes were actually for Trump. They didn't want to mention that part because that would mean that their only evidence they could find looked like inaccurate voting by Trump supporters. When they get pinned down and forced into answering questions, the inevitable answer is we do not have any evidence for what we're saying. But they keep saying shit in public. I don't have a bias here. Me reading their own assertion in court that's part of public record isn't me making up a fake story. It's me quoting Trump's lawyers. And Trump associates and everybody under the Trump banner has done over 30 cases and lost them. They won one case demanding a specific ruling or change in the way the votes would be recounted. And they still ended up losing the election. And again, all of these are over enough of votes to technically get into a courtroom, but not enough to decide that you're not going to let a certification happen. And we're at the day where they can't go any further. I'm all for making sure the election was done honest and fair. We've seen so many mail-in ballots, last-minute rule changes, officials not in position to do so. Some of them were in position to do so. It's questionable whether they should have been. And I have to say something. I don't agree with some of the changes that were done. But they were done within rules. You can complain about this later, and honestly, we should. We need to change our election systems to where they're much more uniform. If I move to another state and they have some hinky rules, I won't know how to do anything. And New York needs to be revamped completely. It's a mess. Just saying. Seriously, Cuomo. There have been bags of ripped up ballots where Trump was chosen found in trash cans. It's illegal to dump ballots, including those that can't be read. It's not illegal to dump test ballots or hypothetical ballots where they fill it in for you and they show you where to fill it in because they're telling you, be a good Trump supporter, fill in these dots. Some of the things you're referring to are probably not really ballots. They were example ballots or test ballots or whatever. But if you have a case like that, I need to know what keywords to look up or what website you got that from, because I've only seen fake stories about that. Like 4 so far, but I don't know. Next. If the tables were turned and it was Biden's ballots allegedly stolen, I would support the investigation. Yeah, I would too. But I haven't found any examples that, number one, even amount to 1/100%. I really haven't. I haven't found any examples of it being widespread. And I have only found examples of, if you were to push it, it would affect the vote by 1 part in 1,000 or less. That's not enough to say that we can't certify an entire state just so that you can make sure Trump loses less, which is the motivation of the people complaining. Biden lost in a couple of states. You don't see him suing them. People even bring up Hillary Clinton suing or Al Gore suing and saying it's all the same. No, it isn't. It really isn't. In some of these states, there was real issues to discuss. And if anybody's curious, I don't like elections being done by electronic voting at all. I don't want the computers involved. Sorry. Everyone's main concern now is making sure it's a fair election. Just last year, some top Democrats complained and concerned about the machines. There's nothing anyone can say that would convince me that it's a bad idea to look into this, especially with all the changes. I agree with you, 100%. Now let's get to that doctor so that I don't have to waste your time on that. Well, we'll see what happens. Mike Yeadon made a complaint and an assertion. He said we should listen to him about COVID-19 second wave being faked 2 months ago. That's his assertion. What I said in the video was, this is what I can look up about him, that is what I can confirm, and here's the things being said about him that are not true. The assertions about him as a meme or a public figure, at least in the popular culture sense, are not confirmable. I'm not saying he isn't what he is. I'm saying people keep saying things about him to blow up his reputation, when really he's just saying 4 months ago, I don't think a second wave is going to happen. And it is happening, and he's wrong. How dare you, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to take the video now. Anyway, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And yes, Trump lost the election. And yes, his side, more than others, is lying about it and trying to reverse rig it. They're demonstrating that, and I read from their own assertions in court. They say they don't have evidence. I'm not assuming they don't have evidence. They said they don't. It's a smokescreen. Cope. Goodbye.